Welcome to Sunday. Nice to see y'all. Glad y'all made it. A little bit of housekeeping. This is a new Zoom ID, so I am keeping my phone on. You might hear it. And I'm going to check my email because some people might not find us. Um, some years ago, I moved my therapy office. I was talking about this to the Louisville sitting group yesterday. I moved my therapy office. I didn't move it that far. I just moved it to the other end of the building. And before I did that, I told everybody every week for 3 weeks, I handed out flyers. I told everybody at the last session, gave them another, the last session before we moved, and some people still went to the old address. That's just the way life is. So I'm keeping my phone on in case somebody goes looking for us and can't find us. Which brings me to the reason why I did that. Starting on the 29th, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, I'm going to be offering another sitting every Wednesday at 6:30 in the evening. And I had to change the Zoom ID so I could use the same one for group. So that's what that's about. So yeah, I'll be sending out another notice on that when it gets closer. Feel free to join us. So let's just take a second to settle. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most misunderstood concepts in Buddha and Dharma, that is self and the relationship with self. I've attended a couple of Dharma talks recently where this was the subject, and some ideas came to mind of how to approach this. And I thought I would share that with you this morning. And we'll get to that after the meditation. So I'd like to invite you to find a posture where your body is relaxed but alert. And settle. Let's just start by being aware of your body sitting or on the cushion or whatever you're sitting on. And we'll begin with a few slow, deep breaths. Just as a way of connecting with the body. And on the exhale, let's just begin to soften the body. Relax the muscles in the face. They do a lot of work. And on the out breath, relax your shoulders. One more slow, deep breath, continuing to relax on the exhale, and let your return to normal. And on the exhale, continuing to relax your body and soften. Relaxing the muscles around your eyes and just letting your eyeballs relax in their sockets. Letting your jaw muscle relax. Letting your belly relax. Just hang. Letting your belly hang and expand on your in-breath. And letting your mind settle and quiet. Your thinking mind tends to go a lot of the time. So we're just going to let it gently, to the degree that we can, settle and quiet. And as you settle into your body, let your attention come to your awareness of the body breathing. You don't have to do anything with that. Your body just breathes on its own. And we're just watching. Noticing the sensation as your diaphragm relaxes and your shoulders relax a little at the end of the exhale. Maybe there's a pause for a second. Noticing the transition, the physical sensations, the transition from the out breath to the in breath. Sort of riding the sensations of the in breath. Noticing the sensations of the end of the in breath and the transition to an out breath. And the sensations of your body relaxing into the inhale, into the exhale. Your awareness rest on your breathing, however that works for you, wherever you find that easiest to focus. Maybe on the belly or the chest moving up and down. The sensations of air moving in and out of your nose. Maybe just globally on the body breathing. Your mind may wander off in thought. Just notice that without getting wrapped up in the content concerns of your thinking. Just notice that your mind has wandered off. And gently, compassionately, with no rebuke or recrimination, just bring your focus back to your breathing. As many times as you have to, it's okay. It's the function of the mind to wander around. And we're just practicing bringing it back. Focus on the breath, one breath at a time. may come and go. It's okay. Feelings may come and go. It's okay. You may notice there's nothing new in the thought stream most of the time. Just notice, thinking, and come back to the breath in the present moment. And as we come towards the end of it, take a moment to notice has changed or shifted in the mind or not. Whatever it is, okay. And let whatever benefits you may have received from this sitting help you come into the world with kindness and compassion, to gaze upon the world with all of its joys and all of its sorrows, with kind eyes and a compassionate heart. And may it be that the benefits of this sitting and the kindness and compassion we may choose radiate from us out into our households, out into our neighborhoods, out into the world around us. And may it be that the benefits of this sitting enable us to bring kindness and compassion to all of our interactions and to ourselves when we feel like we have missed the mark on that. May the benefits of this sitting and this practice be of benefit to all of you everywhere. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings be May all beings be at ease and at peace. Thank you for your practice. So, because people who are relatively new, I'd like to talk a little bit just at first about what I had to as, or what I've heard of and referred to as the manual labor meditation. I do this wrong. The doing is the doing it. The mind wanders off, and you come back, and it wanders off, and you come back. And you may have to do this 20 times a minute or not. But that's the work. Just coming back and coming back and coming back. And I say in the 12-step world, keep coming back, it works. So, just a reminder to be gentle with yourself during this practice. So, I am not who I say I am, and I am not who I think I am. My way of talking about the concept of self. Buddha has been quoted as saying there is no self. There's only one problem. He didn't actually. Thanissaro Bhikkhu, the Buddhist monk, scholar and translator. If you want to see his work, go to accesstoinsight.com. He's translated almost the complete canon. Calls there is no self the granddaddy of fake Buddhist quotes. And it leads to a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. But Buddha did articulate what in Pali is referred to as atta, the concept of not self, which is different from the concept of no self. I have a sense of self. It may or may not be an illusion. Rather than this solid that we tend to cling to in this culture, is articulated five aggregates that we compose a self from. One is material, whatever this is you see in front of you. Feelings, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel indifferent. Perceptions, which are murky at best. I was at a workshop on media relations for a bunch of executives, and one guy kept nodding off, and I thought, oh, I'm losing this guy. He's just plain bored. And what was going on is he had a cold. He took some Benadryl. I'm surprised. When I later found that out, I was surprised he didn't just plain. My perception was like, okay. And my feeling, I have to remember, are not facts. And then there's mental fabrications. I like that because that's thoughts. They're just fabrications. They are not indicative of what's going on in the real world. And the most important thing I have to remember about what my thoughts and what's going on in my head is it's not going on anywhere else. And consciousness, that's the fifth aggregate. I'm awake. I'm aware. But all of those things can lead to some, because they're kind of ethereal and distorted. How I feel about my body changes and my perception of things around me changes. But I kind of ball all those up and I create a sense of self. So in my mind, I have retranslated anatta, a word on translation. Buddhists like to argue about translation. It's the Great Debate Society. I'm on the mailing list for the Berry Center for Buddhist Studies, and they had a free workshop, 4 parts, and it was called Dharma Study for Poets and Engineers. And it's interesting because I'm a poet. And it was the first hour, and I realized the whole thing was going to be this, an hour-long discussion of the minutiae of translating one word from Pali to English. So, translation is fluid, and what I have chosen to believe is that anatta refers to no identity. Because identity is something that we cling to, and clinging is the root of suffering. I cling to my identity as a therapist for a long time, and then I wasn't a therapist anymore and I felt lost. I spent 20 years as a journalist at a daily newspaper in Silicon Valley, and I really did wrap up my identity in that. And then I wasn't doing that anymore, and I didn't know who I was, and it was sort of a crisis. The concept of identity crisis. And one of the ways this shows up, Agatha Christie, I'm going to quote another great sage, said, as life goes on, it becomes tiring to keep up the character you invent for yourself. The way you think you are is not the way you are, it's just the way you think you are. And a really good example of how this can play out. Anybody familiar with Leonard Cohen? The great poet, writer, musician. He was also a Zen monk studying with Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center, and Jewish, like me. And he went to Roshi and said he was having a really, really hard time accepting teachings from Roshi because he had family who died in the Holocaust, as did I. And the Japanese were on the wrong side of the Holocaust, and he didn't really know how to get past that with Suzuki Roshi. And Roshi simply looked at him and said, "You're not Jewish. I'm not Japanese." These are identities that we cling to, which often become boulders in the path. Now, I have all kinds of identities. Some of them work and some of them don't. I'm a meditation teacher. That's a relatively new one. I'm a therapist, but I gave that one up. I'm a friend. I'm an addict. That is true. I'm a husband and a stepfather. I'm a baseball fan. I like that one. I'm a record collector. When we moved here from California, I sold 1,500 records and then moved 1,500 records when we came out here. But I get to choose how I relate to them. And I have a bunch of other identities, some of which work and some of which don't. I grew up in this really chaotic, abusive, violent family, and I identified myself as a survivor, as an abuse survivor. First, I identified myself as a victim, and I decided that was not at all functional. Right? Because that gave me a certain amount of entitlement. So then I identified myself as a survivor. And the point is, these things are fluid. And then I decided that didn't work for me anymore either. Because surviving is not good enough. Thriving is where it's at. And then I decide that I'm okay. People identify. In the days before sobriety, I was untrustworthy and unreliable. That's another identity. And I assumed that identity and used it as a way to feel bad about myself. I thought I was broken. That's another identity. I thought I was damaged. That's another identity. The list goes on and on and on and on. And we claim these like they are who we are, but they're not. Here's another identity tagged with. I used to work at juvenile hall on the mental health team in Sacramento, California. And one of the kids was like, "You're an asshole." I said, "Yes, well, that's true. It's Mr. Asshole to you." Anybody want to guess how fast that got around the building and how long that stuck to me? I was cool with it. I mean, the other thing about these identities, we get to decide whether we're okay with them. It's all very fluid. In my therapist days, people who know me as a therapist know that I don't really believe in diagnosis. Reasons that I'm not going to get in. I don't believe in book burning, but if I did, I would start with the diagnostic manual. But insurance companies, the waste byproduct of the financial system, insist on a diagnosis if they're going to pay for somebody's therapy. So I had to write something on the form. but I never told somebody their diagnosis. Because what tends to happen, what I noticed when I did that, is they kind of wore it like a cloak. It became an identity that they walked around in. Somebody would come to me and say, I'm a borderline personality. I'm like, okay, well, that means different things to different people. But wore that as like shame, as like a cloak of shame. And these identities, these various selves that we accumulate, they don't serve us. If you work through the 12-step process, you run into this when you get to the 6th and 7th step, which ask, who now? So it turns out that I am not what I am, and I am not who I think I am. I'm what I do. Your actions are, in fact, the only thing you own. They're the only things that create karma. Feelings don't create karma. Thoughts don't create karma. Karma, defined as an action that creates a consequence, as all actions do. If I get locked into this identity, there's a whole bunch of expectations that come along with that. I'm supposed to act like a journalist. I'm supposed to act like a therapist. I'm supposed to act like a victim. I'm supposed to act like, and it brings with it a certain amount of entitlement. Well, I grew up in this crappy family, and that's why I'm dishonest and unreliable, right? And I went through some period of that. Decided that I don't want to be that, and we get to decide what works and the degree that we cling to these is a source of suffering. How many stories have we heard about somebody who retires and they don't know who they are anymore because their whole identity is wrapped up in going to work to do whatever it is they've been doing? And then they sink into depression and they have to sort that out. So if I am what I do, then I get to choose who I am, and I choose to be an honest and reliable person. I put a lot of stock and a lot of value in that. We don't different. We don't have to cop an identity to be someone else to be okay. And one of my favorites about this, I may have told this story before. I probably did, because one of the identities that I'm aware of is I have a memory like a sieve. That's the way it goes, man. Although I can remember song lyrics and poems, I don't know. There's a spiritual master up in the Himalayas, and he's dying. And his principal student is studying somewhere in America, and word gets to him that the master is dying. And he feels he has to go to him, and it's a very arduous and long journey. So, first he flies, then he takes a train, then he takes a bus, then he then there's a horse, a mule-drawn carriage, and hiking up the mountain, gets to the bedside of the master. And the guy is obviously down to his last, and he gets to the bedside, and he kneels down, and he says, "Master, what is the essence of the teaching?" The old man looks at him with total compassion and says, "Just this. This is it." Yeah. And my takeaway from that is, this is it. We're okay now. All of those identities that we clung to be okay, we don't really need any of them. And they become anchors to behaviors that don't work for us, and they become sources of suffering if they leave us wondering who we are without them. So Contemplating this brought me back to one of the Dharma books that I read by Cheri Huber, Cheri with a CH, Huber. Cheri is a Zen teacher, has a monastery that she built in the Sinaloa foothills. Those of you who see me read quotes from the Earth House was written by one of her students who is building a house on the site of her monastery. And these books with great titles. This one is called The Key, and the name of the key is willingness. And she says, you might be surprised to find that when you might be surprised to find that when you look at yourself to be who you are, not who you think you are, when you allow yourself to be who you are, not who you think you are, you really are quite an acceptable person. And with a little practice, you'll even realize that you're, in fact, a lovable person, a love-able person, just by accepting who you are. And then she goes on to say, the ways you think you are, not the ways you really are the bars of your personal prison. Please recall, she writes, just because you think something is so, that you're bad, selfish, ugly, perfect, brilliant, or inadequate, doesn't mean it's so. It only means you think it's so. So let's decide that we are okay now and act that way. I learned very early on in my sobriety that I was as sane as my behavior, which is pretty much out of control before. Starting with being one of those kids in high school that you really are hoping your kids and grandkids don't hang out with. And that was my identity. I was this unacceptable human being. And I had a whole bunch of behaviors that reinforced that. I'm not going to get into the roots of that and the family I grew up in and blah, blah, blah. It's because it's all blah, blah, blah. To decide that is not who I am. And to be someone else by acting. So let's all meet ourselves with a little kindness and a little gentleness and a little compassion.